Welcome back. This is Today on ENCA. The Tourism Business Council of South Africa says it is pleased to hear that government is planning to ease COVID-19 restrictions. This follows the announcement from the Health Ministry that government plans to end the national state of disaster. The council is urging government to scrap the PCR test requirement for vaccinated travelers. Chifiwa Chivengwa, the CEO of Tourism Business Council of South Africa, joins me now for that conversation. So I read somewhere that, Mr. Chivengwa, that you are describing the requirement of a negative PCR test for incoming visitors as the biggest threat to South African tourism. That's pretty strong, and you must have your reasons for that description.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It is the biggest threat. If you look at what's going on around the world and how many countries are opening up for fully vaccinated travelers to travel to their countries without needing a negative PCR test, it's many of those countries that are doing that. And any country that does that, it gains an advantage. And by advantage, I mean a competitive advantage over other countries that still require a negative PCR test when a traveler arrives in that country. So what we're calling for is that, the tourism industry has been showing some green shoots. We've seen that locally people are traveling. What's left is to reignite the international travel. And to do so and to really put fire into the tourism recovery strategy, we need to remove the requirement of negative PCR for fully vaccinated travelers that are not showing any symptoms. There's no need for them to be carrying a PCR, a negative PCR test. There's no need for them to have any antigen. If you look here in South Africa, anyone who doesn't have any symptoms of COVID is not even required to test. So what we're calling for is that let's be consistent. In order for us to open tourism, let's allow those that are fully vaccinated to come into the country without requiring the PCR test. And we'll see many, many tourists choosing South Africa as a destination, and it will support the tourism recovery, therefore boosting jobs and boosting the economy.
Not only do you say this is an action that needs to be taken, you are emphasizing the urgency of the moment. You are saying there's even a window period within which we must take this decision. Why is it urgent? I get that, you would want the decision taken, but why is it urgent?
Well, it's an issue of competitiveness. If many countries are making it easy for tourists to travel to their countries, it means that we're going to be left behind. If you look, our neighbor, Botswana, has taken that decision to say anyone who's fully vaccinated, you're not showing any symptoms, please come to our country and be able to travel our country. So we're saying that we should not be left behind. We don't have time to convince tourists to come to South Africa. Other countries are already working. So we need to get on with it. We need to work. We need to make sure that, our source markets, those that are in Europe and those that are in North America, and South America, and Asia are able, to consider South Africa as a destination. If we don't do so now, many of our trade partners, these are tour operators that are based overseas, are going to choose other countries over South Africa, and we're going to have a whole year to wait until next year to be put into the itinerary. So we need to move fast, and we hope that this coming week, or this week rather, the Department of Health is going to make an announcement, and CCC will sit and consider everything that we've put on the table, and we hope that it's going to be positive, and we hope that we're going to remove this PCR requirement to ensure that, we return to some level of normalcy when it comes to the tourism recovery.
Why is this requirement of a PCR test so complicated? Why does it make the traveler's experience such that if I can help it, I'd rather not go to a country that requires me to have a PCR test? Talk to that in relation to also the other requirements for a traveler. For instance, those that need visas, for example, to come to this country.
Well, number one is that the PCR test is costly, and many countries don't have the PCR testing, places in convenience places like what we have here in South Africa. So it's costly. That's number one. I've looked at many emails that I've received from tour operators overseas, people who organize groups, and you will see how much money is being spent on, getting the PCR test, before they come to South Africa. So it's costly. And that money could have been spent here in South Africa along the value chain of tourism. So that's number one. Number two, it brings this uncertainty that I cannot book South Africa until I know whether I'm positive or negative. So it means that people are going to postpone, or they're going to say, well, let me not spend my time looking into South Africa. Let me look at a destination that allows me to travel, and I should be able to get there and I should be able to come back without any issue. So for us, you really have to wait 72 hours before you could book your flight to come to South Africa. So that's a risk. It means that they are not going to choose us, they're going to choose other destinations. And that is why we're saying the fully vaccinated travelers that are not showing any symptoms should be allowed to travel. Of course, those that show symptoms have to be treated differently and protocols have to be followed. But for us, the most important thing is that if we remove this, it will make sure that people come here because it's costly to do PCR. Some places, people have to travel far away to do this PCR testing. And therefore, the ease of travel is not there, and South Africa won't be considered. So with those two things, plus the issue around trust and confidence into the destination is quite important. People want to know that they can come here without any hassle, and we should be able to welcome them for the sake of our economy.
Did I read correctly that the UK has actually gone ahead, is among those countries that have gone ahead and scrapped this requirement of a negative PCR test? And the reason I ask you is that it would be ironic, wouldn't it, that the country that was first out of the gates in terms of banning travel from several African countries late last year, the costly ban, the irrational ban that happened, is now leading in as far as this is concerned. I suppose it would speak to, the sign of the times to say it is time to move on in how we deal with the pandemic.
No, absolutely. The UK has gone ahead and said anyone who's fully vaccinated should be able to travel, including other regions of the UK. In Scotland, if I'm not mistaken, have done so. So many countries are following suit. So what we need to do is to follow suit, because if we don't follow suit, it means that we're doing the same things that we were saying other countries are doing to us. So let's recognize that those that are fully vaccinated should be able to travel. Let's follow science, because I haven't met one scientist, even here at home, who's saying that those that are fully vaccinated should be held back. In fact, even the World Health Organization has been saying that those that are fully vaccinated should be able to travel. That's the whole point of vaccination. And therefore, we need to go with that regime to make sure that the vaccinated travelers should be able to travel. And I said, as I've said before, if we don't do this, other countries in our neighborhood will go ahead and do it, and it's going to divert traffic from South Africa to those countries, and we're going to lose. And we're going to wonder why we're not rebounding or recovering from tourism point of view. So that's why we're calling for government to make the right decision to allow us to trade and to get more tourists in.
Lastly, Mr. Chiwenga, locate this for me within the context where you said earlier on that you are starting to see green shoots within the South African tourism economy. What do those green shoots look like, and how do we help those green shoots to sprout even further, in addition to this, of course?
The domestic market is doing very well so far. It's really, picking up nicely from leisure point of view, and we've seen government starting to travel. We've seen corporate starting to travel. So things are looking, rather better than before. And for us to really turbocharge our recovery, we need the international travelers to come in. We need those dollars, the pounds, and many other currencies, outside of our country to come into South Africa. And if we're able to remove the obstacles like the PCR requirement for those that are fully vaccinated, we should start to see our forward book starting to look much healthier. We can then plan in terms of how many people we need to bring back to work. We can then plan in terms of, what type of experiences, people are going to be doing. So that's going to help us. So what we have seen domestically is good, but it's going to be even better if we get the international market to come back into the country, and we should start to see more people going back to work and more people getting paid what they were paid before COVID starts. So it's that important that we get this right, and the decision that's made is a right and correct decision.
All right, Chifhiwa Chibengwa is the CEO of the Tourism Business Council of South Africa, weighing in there around this requirement that continues to exist in this country for people who are coming into the country from outside to present a negative PCR test for COVID-19.